I did install the new BUCKLOS 120 millimeter travel 32 millimeter stanchion air fork. When I was shopping for an air fork, I didn't want to spend a lot of money on one initially because I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to get that Suntour spring fork off the bike. Not that it wasn't a good fork, in my opinion, it's for a spring fork, it's very good. But the one thing I noticed, the very first thing I noticed after changing out to the BUCKLOS was the weight difference. I thought the first thing I would notice would be the ride difference, or no, it's the incredible weight difference, and it's significant. The tractors have been tearing this up. I think I'm going to move the camera to my helmet. This farm road is always a little rough, but it's particularly beat up. At any rate, the new air fork seems to work quite well. Last night was actually the first night that I got to use it, and I was smacking speed bumps and jumping off of curbs and just generally being a pest with it to see how it would react to different pressures. It seems to like about 115 to 120 pounds for being stiff, but I want it to be kind of soft because the whole idea of a suspension fork is to eat shock. Now it has this thing called ABS. I don't know what that stands for, but it does in fact control how stiff it is when it bumps into things. So it can go from very little movement to quite a bit of travel, hitting the same object at the same speed. So I think keeping it soft and then playing with that might be the ticket. I've never had an air fork before, and I never had an air suspension dropper seat post before. So it took me a while to figure out the suspension seat post, but now I'm in love with it. I use the dropper feature quite a bit, especially on gnarly terrain where I need to keep my feet, or I potentially am going to need my feet, and for getting on and off the bike. It's just a lot nicer to get on and off the bike with the seat lower. Normal riding position, the seat's pretty high. You know, this is a kind of a touring bike, It's not much different than a gravel bike in the way it's set up. It's a trail frame that I converted into an e-Mullet, and now with the 120 millimeter travel fork, it has a 65 degree head angle, which is relatively relaxed. That's pretty slack for a trail bike. It was 68 degrees out of the box. When I made it into a mullet, it became 67, and now it's 65. That's with a 27.5 inch rear wheel with a 2.8 tire. The original 29er wheel in the front with a 2.4 inch tire. And now it has the 120 millimeter travel fork. Now, it may not be a full 120 millimeter travel, but the stanchions are longer. And like I say, I'm still experimenting with air pressure and this thing they called ABS. I got to find out what that's supposed to mean, but it does in fact work. If you make it all the way hard, the fork gets rigid. And right now it's in the softest position. On the below is the return speed, which is really nice, and it goes from very quick to a springy return to a nice sluggish return, which is excellent. The dampening on the Suntour spring fork does exist, and you can even buy dampening cartridges for the spring fork, which nobody does, but they sell them. But the dampening is done with a rubber insert in the return spring. So there is one, and it does work, but it's fixed. With this, you can make it as fast or as slow as you want. There's very little doubt that the bicycle is smoother with this air fork. It's about the cheapest fork I could find. If for some reason it begins to perform badly, breaks or begins to show any sign of becoming unsafe, I'll replace it with a RockShox. Now, while I had the fork out, I popped out the headset and took a look to see what I could do in the way of installing a 44 millimeter headset cup, which would work for a 1.5 inch 1/8 taper fork, and there's no problem with that. There's plenty of room in that head tube. There's no flanges or anything holding it up, so I can pop in a different headset, get a tapered fork, and if I do that, get a more expensive fork, a decent, like a Fox or something, I'll invest in a through axle wheel and have a really decent setup. But as this is a touring bike, I've mentioned on different occasions, the straight head tube with a 1/8 inch steer and the quick release axle works perfectly well, and I've been using them for something like 50 years without any kinds of problems. What I haven't been using for 50 years are disc brakes. That's relatively new to me. This is my second bike with disc brakes. My first mountain bike was a piece of garbage, and I won't even talk about it. In fact, I gave it away, literally gave it away, and that's when I built my Milwaukee gravel bike. And that has cantilever brakes. That was years ago. Disc brakes were an option, but I never thought I would want them. But I'm beginning to wish now that I would have put disc brakes on that bike. But for what it is and for what I use it for, the cantilevers are no hassle and they work fine. One thing I don't want to do is get too comfy with my hands on the tops here. In these loose rocks, that's a good way to have an accident. I also made the the handlebars 1 inch higher. That does a couple things. It brings the handlebars a bit closer to me, not only vertically, but closer horizontally. Just a little. So it shortens my reach. But I wanted the handlebars a little higher. They weren't that bad before, but there are times I don't feel like leaning over so much. And I do have the drops when I want to. And other times I like to be in the grips, and the brake grips, like I am now, are on top of the bars. So I have different possibilities for comfort. Well, anyway, as you can or cannot see, the new forks are functioning very well. I'm getting quite a bit of travel out of the current setup. And I'll continue goofing with the air pressure. One thing I need to learn how to do is put my suspension seat post down when I dismount the bike. So these are the new forks. Here's where the travel is going to right now at 110 psi. And as far as I can tell, they work just fine. At least at this stage of the game. Well, gonna run.